And in my first tournament as the Aussie Sevens coach was Sydney, which is our home tournament. And I'd been told that Quade Cooper was coming in from France, from Toulon to play. And he was arriving on the Wednesday and I was going to pick him for that tournament. And I said, I'm not picking him. And they said, well, we're bringing him in. I said, I don't care what you're doing, but I'm not picking him. I'm not picking him for a number of reasons. One, he's arriving on a Wednesday from France. We play on the Saturday. Two, he's never played a game of sevens in his life. We're representing our country. And number three, I'd be spitting in the face of one of these young blokes because he's now going to miss out, having worked for 3.5 years. So I don't care who it is that you're asking me to bring in. I'm not putting him in the football team.
Today's guest has coached rugby at the top level since it became professional 25 years ago. He has worked with the New South Wales Waratahs, the Brumbies, Suntory Sungoliath, Canon Eagles, Harlequins, Connaught, as well as being the technical advisor to the Wallabies under Eddie Jones. He was also the Australian Sevens head coach for the Commonwealth Games and the 2016 Olympic Games. In this episode, we take a deep dive into the coaching world, how to bring the best out of your players, coaching philosophies and principles. We talk about switching between coaching 7s and 15s, how the athlete has changed in 25 years, large multi-sport events, and advice for aspiring coaches. Here is Australian legend Andy Friend.
He's so dangerous, Freddy Krueger has nightmares about him!
Hello and welcome to the Rugby Hive. I'm Dallen Stanford, and despite my South African accent, I was fortunate enough to play rugby for the United States on the Sevens World Series.
And I'm MacDowell, a former Canadian Sevens international. Back in my playing days, I went head-to-head against Dallen in the USA.
For several years, Robin has coached international sevens for various countries, including Canada and Mexico. He's massively passionate about growing the game across the Americas through his MacDowell rugby programs at all levels. I'm currently a commentator for World Rugby, most recently broadcasting the Rugby World Cup in Japan, as well as the amazing Sevens World Series.
More than a decade later, we are teaming up to bring you insights from legendary players and coaches from around the world.
All legends have a story. The Rugby Hive podcast is here to share it.
Welcome to the Hive.
Oh, he's more dangerous than climate change!
Welcome to episode 16. We delve into the world of coaching with one of the greats, Andy Friend. He's traveled the world bringing teams together and getting the best out of his players. A very extensive resume in Australia, plus he's had time in Japan, England, and now Ireland. I met Friendly, as he's known, on the Sevens World Series when he was coaching the Aussie men's side, a rugby intellect, and just a wonderful human.
And he's just pure class. As a coach, he's one of those guys that I just aspire to be like. He's cool as a cucumber on and off the field. He's clear on his direction and focus for the team, for himself. He's got full clarity, full transparency, honest and open, and he's bought into the Connaught philosophy, which is community, family, and that, like the athletes and the staff and the administrator, everybody's aligned, pulling the same direction, and their goal is to win games. They're a professional organization. Since he's gone there, he's just taken over that part of Ireland, and he's made me a Connaught fan. But just a pure gentleman, and like you said, he's coached so many different teams, so many different countries, so many different codes, and so he just brings a wealth of knowledge. And I'm thankful that I've had him as a mentor for the last 3-4 years, and hopefully those coaches out there and young players can learn some stuff from him.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. You know, we can all learn from great folks like that have traveled the world and seen different things in different ways. And I know he's had a big influence on your coaching career as well. We're speaking of which, you know, another busy week for you in Canada.
Yeah, just coaching almost every day right now, but the men's sevens have a couple of weeks off, so I got a little more time on my hands, so I'm looking forward to that. And really, really impressed with my 3 little proteges that are out here on the coast. So Justin Mariner, who's local. The next Pat K, this kid is just grinding every single day, so focused. To be 17 years old and work on your craft 5, 6, 7 days a week and just crazy for it. These are names that you'll see on the World Series in the next few years. Lucas Scheck and again, Chris Norston, good Saskatchewan farm girl, and her older sister, Christina Norston, who's one of the youngest girls at Lindenwood in the States there. I think it was over 60 athletes, and Coach Billy got a hold of me and said she had the top 40 meter time. Just this farm kid from Canada, right? It's a walk on, and there's Eagles that are at that program. I think there's Black Fern athletes, and so yeah, it's been really rewarding getting to work with some of these local kids, and then seeing some of the other ones that are on their way. So yeah, it's been busy, but so thankful to be back on the field with these athletes every day.
As I always say, dream, believe, succeed, Robin.
Every day.
So listen, meanwhile, this side, I got a chance to go to Springfield, Massachusetts. And remember, that's home to the Simpsons. Marge and good old Homer got a chance to visit the New England Free Jacks, the Major League Rugby side here. They're putting on, I was one of their 13 regional training groups. They had over 60 young boys and girls come out for different testing and skill-based sessions. It's just fantastic to see rugby here in the States happen because it's been a long time. And also good to see what the MR sides are doing in the various communities. The Free Jacks, very impressive. I'm wearing one of their shirts right now, Dougie Fife, one of their Scottish international signings, who's carving up on the Sevens World Series in recent years. Each one gets their own personalized kit item, whether it's, a shirt, a hat, or something really cool.
That's really awesome. And how long's he been in that program? Did he just sign recently?
Just signed, that's right. There's a bunch of international signings that are happening recently, and these players their flights have been delayed, of course, due to COVID. So a lot of them were going to land here in November, December, but probably looking early next year before Major League Rugby kicks off in March 20th. So these guys are getting soon. In the meantime, I'm just helping them with a bit of social media and a bit of content creation. So just wonderful to wear their kit with pride. And of course, we'll take anything for free. Send it our way. We'll wear it. We'll showcase it.
Well, most anything. I think we got to make a bet at some point when Canada plays the U.S. who's got to wear what kit. On the Canadian side, they're having an inter-squad game with the national team with the 15 side. So there's going to be actual games and a full-on 15s international camp with Coach Kingsley Jones and his new staff. So that's really exciting. Our national team reforming from a 15 side. Obviously, the bigger internationals over in Europe, we're not going to be bringing them back, but it's more the domestic athletes, get them together before Christmas, and then obviously before they move on to the MLR in the new year. So really excited to see some young names getting a shot building for the next World Cup.
Yes, and the other rugby news on this side, of course, the Rugby Championship, the Springboks have withdrawn, unfortunately, and of course that's a big blow. Very sad, not having the current world champions take part in that tournament. But again, the coaches mentioned that their player welfare is at stake, and so that is understandable. You don't want to send a young side across that get hammered by 50 points because New Zealand and Australia are looking absolutely amazing. A Rib Tickler test match number 2 in the Bledisloe Cup this past weekend, and Caleb Clark, the monster, formerly with the NZ Sevens team, he was just out of this world.
He's a beast, just like his dad was. But again, just so humble, so class, and it's exciting. They're calling him the next Lamu. It just, again, makes me happy that I'm retired. That kid's a unit coming down the pipeline.
Well, Robin, when he's knocking down 6 or 7 Australian international 15-a-side players, not even like the smaller version sevens players, get out the road. The bus is full. Like
smashing them, like exploding through them. Absolutely. Yeah. Very, very exciting. And, again, the cool thing is he's just a cool head and he's taking it in. And for all those young athletes that are tuned into these games right now, because it's the only thing happening, and it's obviously very exciting spectacle. I'm seeing a lot of the kids sharing on their stories the fact that this young man's humble. So it's nice to have those kind of guys to look up to at a young age.
It certainly is, my friend.
I've seen a lot of social media on the Lions 2021 trip. What's that looking like for guests and tourists that want to come to South Africa and take in those international games?
Well, firstly, my friend, I really want to get you across there to experience, all that South Africa has to offer. We'll go on a safari. We'll go to the winelands. We'll go up Table Mountain, ton of beaches. The jars will flow for the whole of July and August, my friend. It's the British and Irish Lions tour. It's so prestigious because obviously every 4 years they go to a different country, whether it's New Zealand, Australia, and then finally they're back in South Africa after a 12-year hiatus. And we have ticket-inclusive packages, so folks can't just go get their tickets. Everything is sold out. Tickets are being given away. But of course, if you go through this travel agency that I book with, they're wonderful. They'll organize everything on the ground. They'll organize your flights. They'll have people meet you there, so they'll make the best trip out of it. And again, South Africa is a very affordable place to be, particularly with folks looking to get their rugby fix. It's been a long time, and the Lions trips are absolutely epic. They travel thick and fast in the UK, and so we need more support for the old Springboks.
Yeah, that's so exciting. And where does somebody go if they want more information?
They can just message me on the socials. They can come through Rugby Hive or the Rugby Corner. And of course, I can just send them quotes, connect them directly with the travel agency. They can figure it out. It's very easy, very sharp. We've got a lot of folks that are booked here from the US. We hope to get a lot from your side, from Canada as well.
I'm going to start working on my Afrikaans. I'm going to get a hold of Frankie Horn here and get him tutoring me once a week.
You better. The old Dutchman, he loves it. Another little quick thing from my side here. I want to say Jacob Lieberman, a guy from the University of Longhorns, Texas here, a local rugby legend, hot stepper himself. He told me this great story. One of his players, he was going to watch Rugby World Cup, and one of his players said, listen, if you can bring back an item, and not just any item, if you can get the Canadian stepper himself, Nate Hirayama, get something from him, he would appreciate that. Anyway, so this coach, Jake Liebman, goes to the World Cup, has a great time. He doesn't find Nate at all until literally the bus is leaving. They're done with the World Cup, and he goes up and he introduces himself, and he says, Nate, listen, I love watching you play as well. This is a story. And Nate says, listen, my bags are packed already underneath the van. But then looks at him and he says, listen, you can have my jumper. And he zips off the shirt that he's wearing, gives it to this guy to go give to the UT legend. And I just thought that story just sums up Nate as a person and sums up rugby and the community, how you can approach somebody and they give you literally the shirt off their back.
Yeah, those little things go so far. I think I shared with you offline, but Joe Mora was one of my guest coaches last year at a camp on Vancouver Island. He's in his early 20s himself. So he's only a couple years older than a lot of these teenage boys and girls. And he shared when he was at BMO Field in Toronto watching Canada, one of the World Cup qualifiers a few years back. And he did the same thing. He's a big Nate Hirayama fan and leaned over the fence. And Nate gave him his socks. I think he gave him his boots, his short, gave him everything. And Joe just talked about what that meant to him, but also how it affected him and inspired him. And then a few years later, Joe was asked to move to the West Coast and train with the National Seven side, and they've been playing together in the World Series for the last 3-4 years. So Joe's kind of messaged the kids, like, if you think you're far off from your dream, anything's possible, but you could be with me and Nate in the next few years even. So two different parts of the world, same guy, same class. It's pretty special. And, even a few years ago, Sonny Bill giving his medal to some young fan. It's just like, you wouldn't see that in many other sports.
Yeah, inspiring stuff. And then, Robin, what a busy week we had with several brands and people sending us some of their amazing products. One of them, support for the Rugby Hive podcast, is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels.
Oh, incredible packaging, incredible product. I was blown away by it all. And here's my new kit, my new shaver, and it's cut proof, which is great for me because I'm a dangerous guy. But for all those listeners out there, I highly recommend it for all those men. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code RugbyHive at manscaped.com.
Yeah, that's wonderful to see. 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and use the personal code that we have for you, Rugby Hive. Your balls will thank you. And then, speaking of other thank yous, Purvi Desai, she has given us some beautiful inspired Rugby Hive masks. I got a couple more in the mail, and I got to send yours to you, Robin. So that's very sweet of her. You can catch the sensation on Instagram at Purvi Physio. And then a shout out to Billy Biltong. This was one of the best deliverables this week. Sample packets, Drovos, Biltong arrived in the mail. It was done before I even opened it. I'm really sorry, Robin.
Well, that's okay. You had the sampler pack. I know I'll be getting the big shipment here in the next few weeks, but I'm crazy for the biltong.
Yeah, so you can visit biltongbilly.com to get your South African flavor in the mail. It was founded by South African Gio Falco out of St. Louis and Rugby ATL in Major League Rugby. You can follow them on Insta at Billy Biltong. And then a huge appreciation for our other partners, Gilbert Rugby Canada, Brand Marinade, and Focus Care Products. Catch the B in all the socials at Rugby Hive on Twitter and Facebook, at My Rugby Hive on Insta. Time now for episode number 16.
Welcome, Andy Friend, Australian international coach, currently in Connaught, Ireland. Thrilled to have you on today. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Robin. How are you?
Doing very well. So how are you managing during this time, the strange new world with the whole world lockdown?
We're going well, mate. It's a weird one because I'm actually enjoying it, to be honest with you. It's very rare that we get the time that we've currently got where we can spend time being rather than just doing. And you can spend time spending some good time with my wife, doing a lot of CPD stuff, keeping fit, keeping active. We're doing a lot of work too, but it is a different period of our lives, and it's certainly something that we're making the most of it.
That's awesome. And what have you been doing to keep busy? I saw a few weeks ago you're out camping in your backyard.
Yeah, listen, we put the tent up. We've had amazing weather here in Galway, which is normally not the case. The sun's been shining. There's not a lot of rain, which is, again, pretty rare, and not a lot of wind. So we looked like we're heading into lockdown. We weren't sure what the rules and regulations were going to be, so we decided to buy a tent. And I said, well, listen, if it's going to happen like that, we're just going to go camping. As soon as the tent arrived, the restrictions came in and said you can't go within 2 kilometres of your house. So we thought, well, we've got this tent, we might as well put it up. So we put it up and we camped out in the backyard. And we could have been anywhere. We were in our backyard. Back at home, we do love camping. We do love being in the outdoors. So it was a bit of home comfort for us, trying to escape a little bit.
The Galway Outback.
Yeah, the Galway Outback with all the trimmings of your house and your comforts of home, but we chose to use those in the morning, but during the night we had the fire out there and we cooked out there and we camped out there, so it was pretty cool.
Tell us about that transition actually from moving from Australia to Ireland and how life has been like obviously before the lockdown.
Yeah, the transition was good. Listen, we're pretty experienced at doing that now. This is just moved into our second home in Galway, but that's our 19th home in 26 years. So I'll say we, but it's more my wife. She's very, very good at moving us around the world. But listen, whenever you come to a new place too, there is the getting to know the place time, and probably your first 6 to 12 months you're just flat out at work. So it's always a busy time for me, but and for my wife, it's her probably more lonely time where she just spends a lot of time on her own, in fairness, but she's very, very good at that. And we've loved it. Galway, I don't know if you've ever been here, but it's a beautiful city. It's a beautiful part of Ireland, the west of Ireland and the Connaught region, and really good people. And they've certainly welcomed us and made us feel very at home.
Yeah, the Irish people amongst my personal favourite, just so friendly and so nice and welcoming. Speaking about people, how are you managing your staff and your team's expectations during this time?
Yeah, we've been good. I'm seeing this time as a really good test of our culture, to be honest with you. One of the things that I often say is that your culture is basically the things you do when no one's watching, and no one's watching at the moment. And it's been a good opportunity to sit back and see how we are going. So I can say that as a collective group, we're going really well. When we moved into this lockdown period, we said there were 3 things that were really important to us. And number 1 was that all staff and our respective families that were safe and well. And we just said, listen, just do everything you can to remain safe and remain healthy for you and your family. And whatever that looks like, make sure you're doing that. That was number 1. Number 2, we said, let's stay connected. Let's keep checking in with each other. You know, we're used to, certainly in rugby programs, but just in life in general, we're used to having people around us. And in this strange time, we don't necessarily have that. So don't be a stranger. We've got all these wonderful platforms now and tools to stay connected. So let's stay connected. And then the third thing is let's come out of this being better in an area. So pick an area. It could be, depends upon your situation, but it could be homeschooling, for example. We've got a couple of staff who homeschooling kids, so be a better homeschooler. If you don't have that, you may be doing some CPD stuff and being better in an area that is of interest to you. It could be fitness, it could be being a better cook, it could be being a better husband, being a better wife, whatever it is. But work on an area and try and come out and being better with that. So that's what we've been focusing on. We didn't put a massive emphasis on having to work. You know, I think that's been a really good thing. That actually came from our CEO, Willie Ruan, where we had a collective Connaught chat. And he just said, listen, I know we're getting paid during this period, albeit some deferred payments, but don't feel guilty about not being in the office. You know, don't create things for the sake of creating. We've just got this unique time in our lives where do what you have to do, but just make sure that you're being productive and you're not just creating work for work's sake. So that's how we've handled it. It's probably we'll call it the Connaught way. I don't know if it's the right way, but it's certainly working for us.
Oh, it's a wonderful environment. Sounds like it. My wife needs to improve her hairdressing skills, I will say. My haircut first attempt, it'll get better, right? Let's rewind it back, Andy. Let's go back to your playing career. Tell us a bit about that.
Geez, that was a long time ago, Dallen. I was a soccer player when it first started. And I remember as a young boy, my father worked in the Department of Finance, and we were lucky enough to move to Switzerland, Geneva, Switzerland. We lived there for 3.5 years. And it was during that period that for Christmas I got a rugby ball, and I'd seen a game of rugby, and I don't know what it was about it, but I always say to people, when the hook of rugby gets you, it's very hard to spit the hook out. And the hook of rugby got me during that period, and all I wanted to be was a rugby player. And we moved then when I was about 14, 13, moved to England. And I played my first game of rugby there at a place in Surrey at a school called Woodcote School. Absolutely loved the game. So that's when I fell in love with the game. I played through schooling years. I was lucky enough to represent Australia for a couple of seasons in my year 11 and then my year 12 schooling years. And then I had a knee reconstruction, which back in 1987 was probably tempting fate a little bit. Pretty much ever since I had that operation, I had troubles with my knee. So my ambition and my desire was to go on and be a Wallaby. I think like every young sporting rugby player, doesn't matter what country you're from, but I think we've all got aspirations of representing our national team. That never came to fruition. I just had ongoing knee reconstructions, and by the age of 21 I'd had 5 operations on a knee, which I said back in an era where you shouldn't be having operations. So it got pulled up pretty quickly, which was disappointing. But the positive side of that is it got me into coaching very early.
It's interesting just hearing your backstory on your sporting career and obviously your coaching career and that transition. I was telling Dallen that out of all the mentors I've had, and I've had a lot across the world, I've been bugging Andy for, I think, 2-3 years from time to time here. And, if I could work beside or be a sponge off anybody, it'd be this man. The interesting thing for those listeners out there is like, how do you become this kind of coach? But just basically like the culture and how you lead stuff. That's what really, really has engaged me. And often the best coaches don't have the biggest or brightest careers. And I know for myself, I've told Dallen that my playing career took me 7 years to play for Canada. I don't think anybody's been cut or failed more than me as far as trying out for sports. So kids typically get a kick out of that, and they do it in an eighth of the time. I guess for you transitioned early into coaching, and maybe talk to us about your early coaching days.
Listen, I always had a passion for coaching, and I'll retell a story, but I'll never forget. I was in about year 11, and we had this career advisory course or something we were doing at school, and they asked us to write down what we were going to do for the rest of our lives. And I would have been, 16, 17. And I remember sitting there thinking, I've got no idea what I want to do. And everyone else was furiously writing. And the teacher came up to me and he said, you've got nothing on your page. I said, well, I don't know what I want to do. And he said, well, what does your father do? I said, he's an accountant. And I said, well, put that down. I said, I don't want to be an accountant. I hate numbers. Like I had no interest in numbers. Well, what about it? And I went to a private school, Canberra Grammar School, and they said, well, what about a doctor? What about all the basic stuff? I said, I don't want to do that. And then the bloke said to me, it was a good question. He said, if I could put you in a room with 100 people, what would you be most comfortable to talk about? And I said, well, rugby. And he said, well, that's not professional because it wasn't back then. And don't be silly, you couldn't do that. But it triggered a spark in my head. And I thought, it's a good question. And actually, my love and my passion is rugby. I could talk to anyone about that. So why couldn't I do that? When I went through my rugby career and it looked like my knee was not going to allow me to do the things I wanted to do, I got into coaching early. And I went and I studied at the University of Canberra, and I did a Bachelor of Applied Science in Sports Coaching, which was only a brand new subject back then. And it took me 3 years to get through that. I then got away from rugby altogether, and I went and worked at an organisation called Outward Bound, which we took people out in the bush, hence the camping and the fact that we love the bush. So for where I met my wife was in a little place called Dead Horse Gap in the middle of the Snowy Mountains. And we basically lived out in the bush for a year and a half until she fell pregnant with our eldest son. And then we decided to give Outward Bound a bit of a miss and try and do something else. And it was at that stage that I said to my wife, by the way, I used to play a bit of footy and I've actually got a coach and I want to be a coach. And so she got duped actually because she met me thinking I was a farm boy that lived out in the bush, and all of a sudden I'm now going to be this football coach. So I was fortunate enough then to get a scholarship at the Institute of Sport, and I went to Institute of Sport in Canberra. Our eldest son Josh was 2 weeks old, and I started coaching there as the coach on scholarship. It was a brilliant scheme they had back then, where they had 15 to 17 coaches of different sports. There was one rugby, there was a water polo, there was a swimming, there was an athletics, gymnastics, and so on and so forth. And they put these 17 young budding coaches into this program. And we did a graduate diploma in sports coaching during that year. I was in charge of 7 players, a part of a satellite program of rugby back then. 3 of those players went on to become Wallabies, Justin Harrison, Joe Roff and Stephen Larkham. So I was very fortunate in my first coaching stint that I had some pretty good footballers there. But that got me into coaching full time. That was in 1994 into 1995 when the game went professional. So I've been fortunate that I started back then, and my journey's sort of gone on from there.
That's amazing, and it's so fun starting out players and then see where they go after. And when you know talent, when you're working with that next generation, you say, well, I think you have what it takes. You can actually back it up with a few names like that.
I'll be honest with that one, Robin, because Stephen Larkham at that time was a halfback. He wasn't our best halfback. We had a young bloke called Mickey Ages, and I remember asking Steve, what did he want to do? And he said back then, I actually want to be the highest paid rugby player the world's ever seen. And I said, have you got a plan B? Because you're going to make it. So I can't profess to have been good enough and smart enough to see that ability. He then went and moved and played outside centre for the Kookaburras back then. Kim Thurban gave him a head start there, and then they moved him. Then everyone saw his talent when he had a bit more space, and then they moved him to fullback, and the rest is history. So I won't profess to have been the bloke who identified that amazing talent that was.
Well, maybe your comments lit a fire, as you were saying before about yourself. With such a successful coaching career, you obviously have a supportive wife, as you mentioned earlier. How have you dealt with so much travel, the pressure, and obviously the time commitment, both while you're at home and while you're away?
She's an amazing lady. Very fortunate there, as I said, when we met, she knew nothing about this rugby career. But I think behind everyone who's successful, you have to have strong support, and you have to have a strong relationship, and Kerry's definitely that for me. She's my sounding board, she's my rock, she's my best mate, and we're lucky to have each other. We've also raised two young blokes, Josh and Jackson, and soon to be 26 and 24, so 25 and 23, but they're good men. And if you talk to those blokes too, they've got a lot of time for their mother, and very, very fond of what she's given them. So I think there's a couple of things you want to win in life. One's the lottery of life. Who are your parents? I got lucky with that. They're good people. And then if you're fortunate enough to pick the right person to spend your life with, then you've done pretty well too. So I think I've been successful in both of those, mate.
You certainly have. Let's go back to some of the mentors and some of the coaches that shaped and helped you kind of growing up, or even just in your coaching career as well.
I've been fortunate to come across a lot of different styles and a lot of different personalities. But if I think back to the ones that have really helped shape me, I think David Brockhoff, when he's passed away now, unfortunately, but Brock was an older coach and a very well-known coach in Australia. He coached the Wallabies in the 70s, a very passionate man about his rugby, and he took me under his wing when I was the skills coach at the Waratahs back in 1996, 97, 98, 99. Just gave me a lot of great learnings around integrity and around your character and around being true to values. They're things that resonated with me because, as I said before, I've been fortunate in the lottery of life. My parents are very similar to that. So I definitely put my mother and my father in that category as well. But from a rugby point of view, David Brockhoff was great with that. Learned a lot from Eddie Jones. Eddie first employed me in Japan in 1999. And as you know, Eddie's world renowned now for his coaching style and his successes. Eddie probably taught me more about just the way to think about the game and the way you continually improve yourself. Like, he's forever reading, he's forever asking questions and trying to squeeze every little ounce and every drop out of himself and others around him too. So I've learned a lot from him. And then probably my time in the UK working under Dean Richards and John Kingston, I had some really good learnings there. So they'd be the main ones, mate, as you're coming through the coaching ranks. They'd be the four people that probably stand out the most.
All legends as well, and tell me then your coaching philosophy. It obviously morphs probably year to year, but you've obviously been involved in the game for so long. So how would you summarize your coaching philosophy changing over your coaching career?
It's a really good question. I think, if I'm really honest, when I started, I probably didn't have a clear philosophy. Knowledge was king back then. You wanted to impart knowledge. And if I had a philosophy, it probably would have been, how can I educate? How can I share my knowledge as quickly as I can? Whereas over time, you realise that coaching's not about that. Coaching's about working with individuals and actually getting them to identify the knowledge that they hold and for them, getting them to express that. So my current coaching philosophy, and the one that I've held probably for the last decade, is to know the game. And I do believe I know a version of the game anyway. That's number one. But more importantly, work with the individual. And on any given team, we've currently got 41 players on contract. You work with 41 individuals, and not one of them are the same. All of them have got different strengths, different work-ons, different goals, different aspirations at different stages of their career. But the more you can get to know them, I think the important thing there is to understand before you're understood, to understand what they want before you impart your knowledge and you try and tell them what you think they want to hear.
I love that philosophy. And tell me about your early coaching days. Were you always such a calm and cool? Did you always have such a calm and cool approach to coaching, or were you an excitable coach when you were young?
I've probably always been reasonably calm on the outside. Believe it or not, this grey hair used to be red hair, mate. So I've got red hair underneath me. So I've got that fiery belly. But more importantly, I didn't respond to the fiery coach. He didn't do anything for me. I liked a coach who gave me the knowledge and allowed me to work with it. And the coach that continually challenged me on that, or used to yell at me and try and pump me up, it did nothing for me. So I wanted the coach to trust me that if he gave me the knowledge, I'd work with it, and I'd work with it in a positive way. So that's probably what I try and be. And again, it doesn't mean that I don't get upset. It doesn't mean that I'm not hungry for and highly competitive, because I am. I always say, if I'm asking the players to show control, I've got to show control. So, and I ask that. I say, in an 80-minute game of football, I don't want you to run around like a lunatic. I want you to be measured with what you do. I want you to be really calm and calculated with what you do, and then go and deliver. And deliver to the best of your ability, and be tough, be hard, but I don't need to see this frantic stuff going on. So if I'm asking for that, I believe that I've got to do that.
When we first spoke, I think 3 years ago, and I was in the build up to leading Mexico to the World Cup, you shared with your Aussie men's sevens side that you live by a few principles. They put it on a wristband, and it's something that became part of your everyday communication and, on and off the field. And I don't know if I've ever shared that with you, but it helped me define my principles or our team's principles, and it's something we live by, whether we were on or off the field. And I just wonder if you could talk a bit about that and your principles that what you had with Australia, and I'm sure you have kind of the same culture with your men now in Ireland.
I think they're really important, and they're, whether we call them principles or whether we call them behaviours or cultural pieces or principles, they all come under the same banner. But you put me on the spot there, Rob. And back then, I know the three we had. I remember the three: united. We said we wanted to be united. We were clinical and we were unrelenting. And I think giving yourself or buying into an identity, what you believe is an identity for your team. Trust me too, they're not Andy Friend's words. And I learnt that lesson the hard way. I learnt that lesson 2008 when I was a coach of the Brumbies, and I walked into the Brumbies, my first big head coaching job. And I had 5 simple values, and I delivered those. Here's what we're going to be, boys. And they weren't bad values. We respect, we take responsibility, the next thing's the best thing, ownership, and working hard for each other. I think that's what they were from memory. But what I learnt from that, they weren't the teams, they were mine. And I subsequently got the sack a year and a half or 2.5 years into that contract. And that wasn't the only reason I got the sack, but on reflection, I looked at it and I thought, actually, it's only when people actually have skin in the game that they really buy in, is my view on that. So since then, I've always tried to work a system where we as a collective group, we come up with what the core values are. Now, those 3 for the Aussie Sevens, that was collective. Basically the question was this: when someone watches us, what do we want to see? What do we want them to see? They walk away from a stadium and they say, geez, that team was... What would resonate with us? And we came up with those 3 things. And funnily enough, in the first year, we came up with clinical and unrelenting. And it was only as we headed into my final year that we added united, because at that stage we become so tight as a group. And we actually said, we want them to see that we actually really deeply care for each other. And we're our own little family, because that's what you are on a 7 circuit, your own little family. So I'm a massive believer in that, just giving yourself as a collective group an identity and then living to that. It's not the words. The words mean nothing. It's the actions, and you've got to live them on a daily basis. So I think culture is a big word that's bandied around a lot through this sort of period. But for me, as I said right at the front end of this pod, culture's more the things you're doing when no one's watching. If no one's watching and you're living those, right, that's now become a habit, and that's ingrained in you, and that's what you want.
Thank you.
So you mentioned the players and the culture. How have the players actually changed? In your 25 years of coaching, you've seen them, you even started before the professional era, but how have they changed over time? There's
been physical changes without a doubt, but there's other changes in terms of the way they mentally approach the game. When I first started, rugby was an amateur game. So you had the players they had to hold down another job. They had a foot in the outside world and they had a foot in the inside world. And as rugby's gone on, the players that are now in the game, most of them haven't had that foot on the outside world. They've come through school and come through university and they've been a star, and they've now moved into a professional rugby program. And so they're probably a little bit limited in a lot of areas in terms of what we call life experience. Not their fault, but that's the way it is. So one of the things that we've attempted to do within our own programs, certainly programs that I'm involved in, is to give them those life experiences as best we can. So that's from a full educational point of view. there's been that difference without a doubt. And as we continue to get better at our athletic performance and the requirements of rugby, and I just think as bodies anyway, we're getting bigger. But they've definitely become more physical. It's a collision game anyway that, you're now getting men of 110 to 120 kilos moving at pretty good speed, whacking into each other. It's becoming far more physical without a doubt.
No, it really is. I know how tough it is. We've spoken to a lot of international players about switching from 15s to 7s or back, the different codes. How have you adapted your coaching to go from 15s to 7s and now back to 15s?
Yeah, listen, when I took over the Aussie Sevens job, I really had very limited Sevens experience. And I didn't appreciate how intricate the game was and how different it was to 15s. It's a game of rugby under the same umbrella as rugby union, but it's very, very different. I say to people, it's a little bit similar to saying I paddle a canoe, a kayak, I should say. Do you paddle on fast water or still water? Because they're very, very different. And the fast water, that's the sevens. Hold on and hang on and off you go and do your best. And the still water, just go as hard as you can. And, normally power's going to win. So they are very, very different sports under the same umbrella. So I did a lot of learning. My first year in the sevens, by the way, my first 7 months, I was, after the first 7 months, I was in Rio de Janeiro, the Olympic Games, and I'm coaching the national team. And here I am, like seriously hanging on for my life, just trying to continue to learn this game of sevens, which to me, just a fascinating game. I loved it. I seriously loved it. But what it taught me over the 2.5 years was the attention to detail that you need and the accuracy that you need. So from a technical point of view, it definitely opened my eyes up to the intricacies of the game of rugby, without a doubt. From a physical point of view, it definitely stretched my view on how much fitter mentally and physically sevens players are than 15s players. And so it's not the 15s players' fault. Well, they're different animals anyway, they're different beasts, but we can push that body so much more. So I really, really enjoyed those 2.5 years because it invigorated my thinking, took me way out of my comfort zone and allowed me to explore all these new areas, which after 21 years, which it was at the time, after 21 years of 15s coaching, I didn't think I was stale, but on reflection, I probably was stale. And as I've moved back into 15s now, I've taken a lot of those learnings and tried to implement them back into 15s. Some of them successfully, some of them not so, because they are such different games. But it was never a plan to do it, to be honest with you, Dallen, but it's definitely worked out well for me, I believe.
Yeah, fascinating. Reading your resume and stuff like that, it's just amazing to see what you've done. But as you said, adding sevens to it, it's a good little spice because for a lot of sevens players now that have gone across, obviously in more recent times and played 15s at the highest level, and a lot of coaches are like, wow, where do these guys come from and where do they get their skills from? But of course, two different games and coaching must be the same like that. So that's great insight. I appreciate that.
Going back to Rio, how was the Olympic experience for you and the Aussie men?
It was different, mate. It was disappointing in the end. You turn up to Olympic Games, you want to win it. There's only going to be one team that walks away that's happy, and that was Fiji. We end up coming 8th, and I made a great coaching error in that Olympics. And the great coaching error was I thought we were really well prepared and really well planned, but the way it worked out, days 1, 2, and 3 of the Olympics were the girls' events, and the Aussie girls, as you know, they were hot favourites going into that, and they ended up winning it. The one thing we didn't talk about is how do we emotionally handle that when they win it. We probably had an expectation that they were going to win it, but and then we kicked off on day 4. So day 4, 5, and 6 was the men's. So day 3, the night of day 3, the night before our tournament starts, we're all sitting around the Aussie Athletes Village and we're watching the women beat New Zealand to win a gold medal. And everyone was so excited, like we were just pumped. It was brilliant, watching the girls win that. We had a few blokes who had relationships with girls within the team, so there was a lot of emotion around that too. But what I hadn't done is said, listen, we need to be able to cut that emotion off straight after the game, and we need to regroup because we got a big day tomorrow. We all woke up the next morning and we're all still buzzing with what had happened with the women. I remember again just before the warm-up, before we played France in the opening game, thinking, what planet are we on? What's going on here? But what it was, and it was a combination of things. We'd had blokes who hadn't slept that well that night because they've been waiting for the girls to get home to say well done. We had the classic bloke, especially Aussie bloke mentality, shit, if the girls have won, we better win. So this new pressure got built up and we hadn't spoken about that. And then just, I suppose, the excitement of coming into Olympic Games. So our opening game against France, and I take nothing away from France. France were brilliant in that game, but we were so far off the pace and we lost it. We lost that game. So we we're in a tough pool anyway, put ourselves on the back burner. So we beat Spain, which we did. And that came into day 2. We had to beat South Africa to stay alive. And we did. And we rallied and we beat South Africa. So we're like, sweet, we're now in the quarterfinal. And the way it fell, the draw fell, we were playing South Africa again. So we knew South Africa and us, we were pretty tight nemesis against each other. And we'd beaten them the first time. And to beat them again was going to be tough. And in fairness, they were the better team the second time we played. So we dropped out of that. So that was frustrating. I think the only other frustrating, people often ask me, how did you find the Olympics? And I use the word awkward, and I'll repeat it. It was awkward. It was awkward in that probably as a young kid, I'd always wanted to be involved with the Olympics, and I had this vision and a dream of what it was all about. And it was that. But at the same time, it was in a country that didn't have any money. And, there was a lot of poverty there. And it just felt awkward that we had this massive vehicle called the Olympic Games in this city. And we had there was so much wealth in sitting, in around in the cars we were driving, in the buses, yet you saw the Brazilians and the people from Rio de Janeiro living in their favelas. And I felt uncomfortable. I really felt uncomfortable with it. And so I probably, am I pleased I went? I'm absolutely blessed that I went and thankful for the experience. But I probably had a different thought going into it than what I did coming out of it, to be honest with you.
And had you been to any multi-sport events for the Olympics, coaching-wise?
Not as a coach, no. I'd been, to a lot of rugby tournaments around the world, and whether it's World Cups or whether it's, Super Rugby or Premiership or whatever, but never to that. And that in itself was fascinating. I think one of the greatest memories of that Olympic Games was the athletes' dining hall. And you could sit there in that dining hall and you would see every shape and size of human being walk through that door. From the tallest bloke in the world, and you start to pick it. What is he, basketball? What's he doing? Must be, to a tiny little person coming through the door. Must be a little gymnast. And then the shapes of the different athletes, depending on whether they were sprinters or whether they weren't sprinters, or shot putters or wrestlers or whatever. So the array of variety amongst the athletes there was really special.
Yeah, I know. My first multi-sport event was as an athlete at the Melbourne Commonwealth Games. So that was very special for me. It was a pinnacle event, obviously. Working across Mexico, working across Canada, there's sub-regional teams on Vancouver Island to provincial games, to Western Canadian games, to national games. And then like in Mexico specifically, they have mini Olympics in each region, and obviously nationally. So for me, it was information overload. I mean, I was, they'd brought in Morgan Williams as a halfback that was playing for Stade Francais. So I was playing in a supporting role at halfback and was the only rookie in the side from that season. But yeah, it was overwhelming, the whole deal. And, we had the queen of the opening ceremonies and 90,000 people, and then 60, 70,000 people in the Telstra Dome. I don't think my head was screwed on at that point, nor was anybody's. And Dallen, I think you were at the Maccabee games, but we were on our feet. We played day one, and opening ceremonies was, day 1 minus 1. And we got home at 1 a.m. Team Canada, we had these really cool white pair of shoes that you'd be better off walking barefoot. We must have walked. If I had my Apple Watch back then, I would have walked 20 miles from, the holding area to the actually opening ceremonies. And after we waved it, kissed the queen, we were one picture and we were gone. But you think about a pinnacle event, 4-year buildup, you're literally thrown under the bus. So, but Australia put on an excellent event. And then fast forward to opportunity, I took Mexico to 2 multi-sport games, and then I've taken Canada to 2 in pathway programs. And the number one, I don't even coach, Andy. All I do is try and shelter the athletes as much as possible and keep it simple and keep it light and keep them off their feet and keep it fun. Having lived that as a player and doing it probably the wrong way, you could actually take a whole coaching course on how to manage athletes at the games. And for us rugby players that finished early, the Aussie security and Aussie police officers were quite hospitable, and they let us have a couple quiet beers in the athletes' village. Well, we're talking day 3 by the time we were done, and we made it to the cup quarters, so we weren't too sad. losing out to the All Blacks, but we were having beers every night. We were there for 6 days. There's cyclists, there's triathletes, there's proper athletes in the Canadian Village, and they were hating us because our event was done. We had over delivered and we were crushing beers every day. So our coach got in a bit of trouble over that. But definitely a lot of challenges around that experience for athletes.
That was the weird thing. So when we finished in Rio, so we were day 4, 5, and 6. The next morning, as a coaching staff, we were ushered out of the village, and we got put in a subsidiary village, probably about 30 miles away, in the middle of nowhere. But the players stayed in the village because they wanted the players to have this experience, and we left one staff member there. So if you can imagine, you've got, as you alluded to there, Robin, you've got, these young blokes who've just finished a 4-year build-up and they've been knocked out on day 6 and they've got another 10 days to go, and they've been told to stay there and enjoy the experience, yet there's no staff there. It was mayhem, mate. So we boarded a flight, virtually the full staff. We boarded a flight 2 days after we finished, and we were out of there. What the players didn't realise, they kept us in their WhatsApp group, and some of the stuff that comes back. At one stage there, it was a text to the captain saying, one of two things has got to happen. You either got to stop doing what you're doing or remove me from the WhatsApp group because I don't want to see this stuff.
I don't want to see it. Well, from a preventative thing, I was at the FISU Games, which is basically the World University Games this summer at the Canadian men's sevens team. We had 2 training sessions on the ground, day 1, and we were going to have one day 2. As far as being on the ground, day 3, we were playing essentially, and no preparation, Andy. Nothing on the ground. I was meeting guys in airports before we got on the overseas flight. So not set up for success, no prepared to perform, just, roll the dice and try and build that culture and set that expectation real time. So I had a senior coach that's coached Canadian women a number of times and some of the men's teams back in the day. One of my mentors, I brought him as my assistant coach, and being a good wily old boy, he dealing with the Italians, and I played a season of pro in Italy. So, everything's domani, which is tomorrow, which there's things move way faster in other parts of the world. Let's just put it that way. So I just said, you get down there. So he went down 2 hours early, even though we booked the day before to get our bus ready to go to training. Long story long, we left 3 hours later and we stole a gymnastics bus. Neil just high-abbed him because he was like a MacGyver. It took 2 hours to the field. We were on the field for 55 minutes, and the full trip was 6 hours for one training session. Now, if you were just get in your car, if we'd taken a cab, it would have taken 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back, full stop. So at that point, and it was over 40 degrees, pulled chute on the second practice of the day, because we've just traveled across the world to get there. And then we pulled chute on the practice the next day. And we just did some mental stuff and did some stuff in the parking lot and did some activation and just kept it light, because the 6 hours of stress round trip was just not worth it. And, being a sevens coach, it's like being a Swiss Army knife. You got to kind of react on the fly, and it doesn't matter what course you take or how much experience you got going there. Every country, every mission is a different deal. I just wanted to dig into the multi-sport experience a bit for all those coaches out there.
And then, Andy, my question to you is a big one that we're always trying to wonder how coaches feel about crossover athletes joining, let's say, the sevens program ahead of a big event like Olympic Games, or even a professional 15-a-side player who's looking to make a late switch. What are your thoughts on that, and how did you manage some of your players that came across ahead of your Olympic experience?
Well, I think if they're going to join, they've got to be better. You've got to make sure that, and it's not that their reputation's better or that their name's better, their performance has got to be better. So we had a couple of challenges as we led into Rio, and before I took the job, there'd been some assurances given to a couple of very well-known rugby players, and we did give them opportunity. So we had Nick Cummins, we had Henry Spate, and we had Quade Cooper, all given opportunities to play. And none of them actually made the starting squad. Henry Spate made our reserve squad and came across. So I think as long as you're prepared as the coach to select purely on performance, I don't see an issue with those people putting their hand up if they want to represent their country. But what I would 100% disagree with is giving a bloke an opportunity because he's got a profile or he's got a name. Because we're talking about, other athletes. When I came in 7 months out from Rio, I basically inherited a group of players who'd been working for just under 3.5 years for this opportunity. Now, if I was one of those athletes, and I always attempt to put myself in their shoes, if I was one of those athletes, and this new bloke brought in somebody who was just a name and overlooked me for that, I'd be furious. I wouldn't trust him. I wouldn't do a thing with him, actually. And in my first tournament as the Aussie Sevens coach was Sydney, which is our home tournament. And I'd been told that Quade Cooper was coming in from France, from Toulon to play. And he was arriving on the Wednesday, and I was going to pick him for that tournament. And I said, I'm not picking him. And they said, well, we're bringing him in. I said, I don't care what you're doing, but I'm not picking him. I'm not picking him for a number of reasons. One, he's arriving on a Wednesday from France. We play on the Saturday. Two, he's never played a game of sevens in his life. We're representing our country. And number three, I'd be spitting in the face of one of these young blokes because he's now going to miss out, having worked for 3.5 years. So I don't care who it is that you're asking me to bring in. I'm not putting him in the football team. And I didn't put him in the football team, and I copped a lot of flack for that. But we went on and we lost the final of that tournament to South Africa in the last 15 seconds. And I firmly believe that those young blokes looked at that and said, I'll back this bloke because he's going to give me a chance. And coaching's all about relationships. It's just about, that bank account of trust where you deposit with every good action you do, you make a deposit in that bank account of trust. You can take it away too, but early on you've got to get some money in there. And I didn't do it to try and build that. I do it because my principals believed in that anyway. But I think that certainly gave those young blokes a belief that actually I was here to support them, which is what we did.
Quality inside.
What was it like stepping away in 2018, closing your time with the Aussie Sevens at home at the Commonwealth game? Not the result you're looking for, but nonetheless, your men played out outstanding. It must have been an emotional ride.
Yeah, it was, Robin. It was emotional because, as I said, when I took the job over, I wasn't sure what I was going to expect or what to expect with it. And we had the disappointment of Rio, but post Rio, we had 25 players in that squad that headed to Rio, or so that we were selecting from Rio. And within a year, we moved on 21 of those players. So we had a brand new squad, and we were building something that was pretty special. And it then became really evident to me. I'd only signed a 2.5-year contract, but it became pretty evident to me that the Olympic cycle was what was most important. And if we could start similar to what the girls had done, they'd started before Rio, they'd started 4 years before, and they'd had this continual build-up. So that was what I was attempting to do. I really wanted to stay on and try and be there for Tokyo, but it wasn't to be. And I was not reinstated there. So my last tournament was Com Games, which was really disappointing at the time because it was a passion, and we as a collective group, that united tag that we had, we were united and we were really, really, really strong together. But life doesn't often give you the things that you want. So it was a disappointing tournament in that I felt that we were ready to win at home. We'd had a win in Sydney earlier on that year. We'd had a couple of wins leading up to the World Series. We'd won in Munich. We'd won in San Jose. We won in the Central Coast. So we had a team that was getting used to winning, but we lost that quarterfinal game against England, and that was the one that stung us. Listen, I left with no regrets with it. A really brilliant 2.5 years, and made some fantastic friendships that will last for life, and worked with a really amazing group of players and staff that we still keep in strong contact with, and sort of got memories there that will last forever.
I guess timing wise, the doors opened up for Connaught, so that's a positive.
And that's the other thing, mate. Listen, often it's not what happens to us; it's the way we deal with it. And I had no control on that, but what I did have control on is how I was going to deal with that. So we were very fortunate then. We had a few job opportunities presented themselves. My wife and I flew over here to Connaught, and we had a good meeting with them here. We met with another couple of clubs, and we ended up deciding that if Connaught was to make us an offer, then we would take that, and we're very fortunate that they did. So as it currently sits, I'm thankful for what happened, to be honest with you, because we sit here now in the beautiful west of Ireland. We've got a great team. We're building something that I think is pretty special. And really, sadly, the Olympics have been postponed. So it's another tough one for all those athletes who had, which every athlete would have had. They would have had July and August in their heads. That's where we're going to be. And now they've got to put that on pause, and go again, and try and get themselves up for next July and August, when in 2021, when that's now going to happen. But they'll do that. The winners will do that for us in our situation. Said, we've moved on from that. I'll watch it intently with interest, but we're here now in Connaught and we're aiming to hopefully try and win something over here.
Looking forward to watching. So what fuels you day by day after such a successful career? What gets you up in the morning?
I love working with people. I always talk about we've all got this perceived level of ability. A lot of people, their ceiling is a lot lower than what they think it should be, is a lot higher than what they think it should be. So we've got this perceived level of ability. And most of the athletes that I'm fortunate enough to work with, people in pro sport, they've got a pretty high ceiling of where they perceive they should be, but they've actually got another one. And it's only when you get them into that realm where they think, I never knew I was capable of that. And that to me, really, that fuels me. I love that energy when you see that, and you see that athlete or that player, that person just find this flow and this energy that they never thought that was possible. And that's pretty damn special for me. So that's what fuels me. I'm very fortunate to, I work in a job that I'm very passionate about, and it gets me up out of bed every single day, and still learning the art of coaching. I'm still learning my communication skills and working with people, but that fuels me as well.
And Andy, if you could share something, we've got a lot of aspiring coaches listening to this podcast. Looking back in your career, a couple of things that you would give as advice to them.
Well, number one, don't be in a hurry. I think everyone's in a hurry. You want to get there tomorrow or yesterday. I was certainly a coach. I was in a hurry. But do your homework. Like, just spend time learning the trade. I think that's really important. I think be really clear on your purpose. What is your purpose? I think if you can clarify that in your own mind, and you can, and each year you can challenge that and have a look at what what your purpose and your reason is for doing what you're doing. And the third thing would be care. I think you got to care. You got to care about the athletes you're with. It's not about you. You had your time in the sun. It's not about you. It's about how you can get the best out of every individual that you're working with. So that'd be the three bits of advice I'd give.
I love that. And putting you on the spot here, what's your favorite team you have coached and why?
Oh, wow. That's a toughie, mate. Listen, they're all unique in their own way. And there's not many that is probably, it'd be an easier question. So which teams didn't you enjoy coaching with?
Sure.
But which I won't answer that. But the ones that I did, listen, I love them all. Like, I'm loving what I'm currently doing. They're just a brilliant group of men. I love the Aussie Sevens. That was great. Had some really good years in Japan. Harlequins was fantastic when I was there. I've been really fortunate with that. And it's not necessarily the teams. As I'm sitting here thinking about it, I'm not seeing teams. I'm seeing individuals. I'm seeing whether it's players, individual players, or whether it's individual staff, or of moments around those teams. So, yeah, probably unlike most would think, I don't think of a team and think, that was the jersey. It wasn't about that. It was about the personal interactions with people.
Each one's their own family, right?
Yeah, they are. And that's, again, that word gets bandied around a fair bit too, family. But and there are many different forms of family, as we know in society. Everyone's got a different version of what normal is. But to me, families, you're always there for each other, and you got each other's back, and you're looking out for each other. And they're the best teams I've been involved with.
What are some of your goals going forward for Connaught?
Well, I want us to win. I don't do anything unless we're trying to win. And I know, some might say that it's not everything, but it is to me. Whether it's winning or whether it's just the performance, I do also think sometimes if your performance is the best it can be, then you're happy with that. So we work on three pillars at Connaught, and they're not mine. This is what the companies or the organisation's built on, but I believe in it. It's ambition. You got to be ambitious. You got to have belief, and belief comes from clarity. You got to know what you're trying to do. And the third one's community. We work. We live and operate in a really brilliant part of the world, west of Ireland. We live in the city of Galway. It's a really strong community feeling around Connaught, and we want to make people proud of what we do. And I believe we're living those three things at the moment. So my desire or my vision of success here is that we pack out the sports ground. We only get 8,500 people in the sports ground. We are in the process of trying to build a new stadium here. That every weekend, if we can pack that place out, and win, lose or draw, we got young kids and mums and dads and grandmas and grandpas who are just proud of wearing the Connaught jersey. And I think on the whole, we're doing that at the moment. So it's pretty good. We're
going to end here with a big one. What's been your most rewarding moment or greatest coaching highlight to date, if you could name one?
Oh, wow. Again, it's funny because it's not necessarily wins. It's probably moments. And it's probably moments that, and sometimes they're really bizarre moments. It's a moment when you've seen a player do something that he never thought he could do, or you've lit up the life of a young kid who gets to shake the hand of one of their heroes, or it's those little things, mate. And so I don't really have we've won some titles and they've been fun. Like you don't not enjoy those. But to be honest, they're really fleeting moments. They sort of pass and go because the next day you've got to go again. But the things I remember is that it's those conversations, it's the handshakes, it's the hugs. When something pretty special has happened and you can look a bloke in the eye and you go, mate, that was unbelievable what you just did there. But that came off the back of so much hard work, and don't underestimate that. But let's go again next week. They're the special moments that I remember.
Well, Andy, we just want to say this has been a thrilling chat with you, somebody of your experience. All the people I've spoken to always talk about Friendly, the coach. And I've seen your name and I've obviously commentated some of the Sevens World Series, but to see how you've come through and coached so many different teams and so many wonderful players, and what the values you bring to the game and the passion, and of course the calmest, coolest coaches you ever meet. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, he doesn't get upset. He's just calm and collected. As you said, you demand that from your players and you can see the results coming through. So we really want to thank you for your time. We know everyone's going to enjoy this one, and be safe out there in Ireland. And hopefully we'll catch up with a bevy soon when we see you next. Yeah,
good on you, gents. No, thank you for having me on, and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you both.
Beautiful ball over the top. Yes, Seppo!
Thank you for listening, you sleek sensations.
If you haven't already, please subscribe to Rugby Hive Podcast and catch us on all the socials at Rugby Hive.
We appreciate your support. Be safe out there, and we'll see you soon.
They've taken the lunch money from South